My name is David Lubo-Robles, and the future of machine learning for geophysics is a powerful tool that can help us to better understand the subsurface, resulting in a more comprehensive reservoir characterization for either oil and gas, geothermal, or carbon capture and storage.
Welcome to SEG's Seismic Sound Off, conversations with geoscientists addressing the challenges of energy, water, and climate. I'm your host, Andrew Gary. In this second episode in a row exploring machine learning, David Lubo-Robles highlights his award-winning paper that utilized novel machine learning methods to enhance interpretability in seismic volume data from the Gulf of Mexico. David discusses the power of two open-source tools, SHAP and LIME. David takes us through his team's research that led to being honored for their work and also shares his journey into geophysics. You will gain insight into the critical role of input quality in machine learning outcomes, the importance of balancing datasets, and the necessity of geoscientific validation, i.e. people. The episode also addresses common misconceptions about machine learning and geophysics, emphasizing the need for critical thinking and geological knowledge to apply these advanced techniques. Please check out the show notes to read David's award-winning paper and learn more about SHAP and LIME. And now, my conversation with David Lubo-Robles. I initially heard from you on LinkedIn when you were celebrating your honorable mention in the category of best paper in interpretation. So it's an honor to speak with you to talk about the paper that was highlighted there, but also more generally, machine learning and geophysics. But let's start with what made you interested in the field of geophysics.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. Well, when I was a kid, I was always interested in the earth in general, and also about energy, how energy was found. So then in high school, I was talking with one of my professors about this topic, about my career interest, and he mentioned geophysics, as a career. So, well, I investigated about the topic a little bit, and here I am. I already did a bachelor, a master, and a PhD in geophysics. So,
yeah, you said you are now in your postdoc at OU. You got your PhD almost a year and a half ago now in May of 2022. So congratulations on that as well. This particular paper that was honored was one of the harder papers for me to kind of wrap my mind around. I was reading it multiple times. How would you briefly explain what this paper set out to do?
Sure. So in this paper, my co-authors and I, what we did is to apply a technique called SHAP that was developed in the machine learning community as a means to enhance the interpretability of machine learning models. We wanted to differentiate between three target seismic phases. In this case, we have a seismic volume in the Gulf of Mexico, and we wanted to distinguish between mass transport deposit, salt appears, and the background siliciclastic sediments. But beyond applying the technique, we actually wanted to understand what is happening behind the technique, how the technique, the architecture, in this case, the machine learning architecture, is using the inputs to make the predictions. We also did a sensitivity analysis. In this case, we have the original seismic volume, and we also changed the signal-to-noise ratio to increase and decrease the signal-to-noise ratio to understand how the quality of the inputs affect the results. What we found at the end is using SHAP, we definitely can enhance interpretability. We can understand the set of rules. That's the term that we use in the paper, that the machine, the architecture, the machine learning architecture used to make the final predictions. And we also found that the seismic attribute importance is dynamic. It changes based on the quality of the input and also which are your target phases, your target labels in the classification.
Yeah, I think that would be intuitive for a lot of people. It's always nice when that is discovered and confirmed when you're doing this work. And you mentioned SHAP there. This paper introduced me to two new acronyms in addition to SHAP was LIME, L-I-M-E. What are these acronyms and how do they contribute to using machine learning for geophysics?
Correct. So LIME, it means local interpretable model-agnostic explanation, and SHAP means Shapley Additive Explanation. So in in summary, what they are, they both techniques, what they do is try to explain the machine learning architecture. So in LIME works more at the local level, let's say. It just allows to understand like a particular area of interest. In SHAP, what we have is like we have both options. We have the local interpretability, and we can also have a global analysis. The way that I like to think about this global interpretability is like it gives me like a big picture, it gives like these are the general trends or the most important attributes for the general classification. And then at the local level, you can go on and analyze a certain area, in this case in the seismic volume. So I believe these techniques are useful in machine learning because it helps us to understand what is happening behind the technique, and better understanding of the technique, we can also make a better assessment of the certainty in the subsurface. At the end, make better decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there. You can't just take any data, anything that you're having, filter it through machine learning. Machine learning is going to fix all of the things happening that you're putting in. And you mentioned a question before about the role of inputs being very important to the work. So when you're using these role of inputs, as we stated, it's going to impact the machine learning results. What were the inputs you used in this study, and how did they impact those results on the back end?
Okay, so we have a seismic volume in the Gulf of Mexico. So what we did is to compute 9 seismic attributes. They represent a mathematical operation to try to extract patterns in the seismic volume. In this case, we're using a combination of attributes that are measuring changes in energy, measure changes in the reflector configuration, in changes in the frequency of the seismic, and also changes in the seismic textures, like the patterns you can see there. So with these 9 seismic attributes, we train a machine learning architecture, and in this particular case, it was a random forest architecture, to differentiate between these 3 seismic phases that I mentioned before. And then we apply SHAP to understand them. So as I said, we also perform this sensitivity analysis to try to see, what happens if the seismic attributes have more or less noise. And what we found is it's critical that you understand which attribute might be better based on your situation,
There was something that happened where the algorithm misclassified certain areas of interest. What steps did you take after discovering that was happening?
Yes, no, definitely. When you train a machine learning architecture, you have a certain degree of accuracy. Well, the first step that we did is to balance the data set. It means that we have the same number of samples per phases. So if we have 3 phases, for example, in this case, we have, let's say, 1,000 samples per phases. We have more than that in the paper. It's just an example. So what we did is we trained, the accuracy was between 81 to 92% accuracy, depending on the signal to noise ratio of the inputs. And then what we determined is we actually wanted to happen what was happening in these misclassified areas. We were expecting them. So what we did is let's analyze the area in general. We have these dipping conformal reflectors close to the salt piers that were misclassified as mass transport deposits or even salt in some areas by the algorithm. And we also have, and on top of the salt piers, we have these seismic multiples, is a type of seismic noise that was misclassified and that were misclassified as entities or conformal sediments as well. So what we did is let's apply SHAP to understand what is happening in these misclassified areas.
Why did you expect, you kind of mentioned, it sounded to me in that response this wasn't unexpected. Why did you expect that maybe some of these areas would be misclassified?
Yes. So as you said, it's not like machine learning is gonna solve all the problems. It's not a magical tool. First, we know the accuracy between 81 to 92%. It's not 100% accuracy. We don't expect 100% accuracy. So we know that some areas are going to be misclassified. And also, we have to understand that we are using seismic data. It's an indirect measurement. There is always some degree of uncertainty in the subsurface. And that's what we see with these misclassifications. The key point here is this is a model that we can use to better understand the area. And we as a geoscientist, we need to address the uncertainty. We have to use our geological knowledge to validate these results.
This paper was awarded the honorable mention in the best paper for interpretation category. What do you think stood out in this paper to the judges?
First, I would like to acknowledge my co-authors for their work, and also to Interpretation Editorial Board and the SCG for the recognition. So I would say that one of the limitations that we have in machine learning is to actually have a wide adoption of machine learning in subsurface, it's like some people see these techniques as a black box, like that you give an input and it magically produces an output. So I think that if using SHAP as a tool to interpret this model, to try to enhance what is happening or try to understand what is happening behind these techniques is what is stood out, for the judges. I think it's an important step that geoscientists can apply this workflow to understand the model better, and based on the understanding, try to tie these possible areas or with the geology, with these possible results with the geology, I would say. Finally, I think that try to understand better this model, trying to understand it and trying to enhance the interpretability of this model is key for wide adoption of machine learning in subsurface. It's very, very important.
What's one misconception, in your opinion, that people often have about using machine learning within geophysics?
Well, I would say there are two sides of this spectrum. The first one is some people think that because machine learning uses advanced math and they take a lot of time for training with powerful computers, they are always correct, they're always right. So the models should be perfect. And that's not the case. And other people that definitely do not believe in machine learning in general. So I think that in both cases, we need to understand that this machine learning is a powerful tool. It will give you a model of the subsurface. It's important that you understand how to train it correctly, what inputs to use, And at the end, with these results, it's our responsibility as a geoscientist to address uncertainty and try to validate these results as best as possible.
What is oversimplified about the use of machine learning?
Well, you mentioned it. Like, I would say that thinking that machine learning will solve all your issues, and it doesn't matter what architecture or what inputs do you use, it will always give you a good result. It is very important to think critically, what architecture is the best one, which are the best inputs for a certain task. It can be seismic phase classification or other tasks in particular. So it depends on what is your goal.
Is there a common resource or reference tool for individuals? You've mentioned, throughout this conversation, machine learning architecture, to discover the various forms of architecture you could use in a study, whether it's SHAP, whether it's something else where someone could see if something better fits the data that they have?
Well, I would say that's part of the training, like a lot of the machine learning process, I would say, is like picking your data correctly, and then you can test different approaches. That's sometimes not easy as it sounds. Also, it's like something called hyperparameter search. So you optimize your parameters to try to see what are the best hyperparameters for the model, what increases the accuracy of the model for your task. Also, I would like to say that SHAP is a technique to understand the machine learning architecture. The machine learning architecture, it can be, in this case, a random forest, but there are also deep neural networks and other architectures in general. I would say besides the data, it's important to know, okay, what do I want to do? Like, for example, do I want to distinguish between phases? I want to perform a classification. Maybe I want to differentiate between faulted areas and non-faulted areas. Maybe I actually want to do a regression to predict some sort of well log. I don't know. It depends on the task. And based on what your goal, you need to determine, okay, which are the best inputs, how to select the data, and then which architecture might be the best one.
What's the question nobody is asking?
Oh, that's a difficult question, I would say. It's a really good one. I would say that seismic interpretation can be very subjective, like even in the same area, different geoscientists might have a slight different interpretation, let's say. So I think I would like to know, is there a way to incorporate that uncertainty in the interpretations as part of the machine learning architecture? Is there a way that we can input that in the training phase? So I would say that's one of the key questions that we need to ask.
What do you want to know about this issue that you don't already know?
Well, about this uncertainty, what is the most optimal way? Like maybe create some sort of average between the interpretations in the training phase, or maybe just optimize the hyperparameters based on the geology. For example, use a different window size instead of your typical 64, 64, 64, or 128 after 128 if you're in 2D. Maybe something that is with a different architecture, like different sizes for the horizontal and the vertical, to try to make more sense of how the geology behaves or how the faults behave in the seismic data. I don't know. As I said, it's a tough question for sure.
We'll link to the paper in the show notes to this episode. But what challenge would you like to leave the listener from this conversation?
I would say that machine learning is not magic. It will not solve all your problems. I think it's important to think critically what is your task, and based on that, what is the best architecture, what are the best inputs. It's also not about using machine learning because it's a cool technique, and everyone is talking about AI and machine learning in these days. It's about thinking and acknowledging that this machine learning is a powerful tool if it's used correctly. So finally, there is some, as I said before, there is always some sort of degree of uncertainty in the subsurface, and we need to address that as best as possible.
Geophysics is always on the cutting edge of technology, and technology is a key driver of how geophysics has grown through the decades. Do you see a parallel to something in the past that was also viewed as like, this is going to solve all our problems, that might be instructive as geophysics and machine learning kind of work out together over the next few years?
Yes, definitely. I learned a lot during my master and PhD and also my undergrad about seismic attributes. So there was a moment in, I don't know, 40 years ago that seismic attributes were very common. And then when we transitioned from the 2D to the 3D space, some people didn't believe in seismic attributes at some point. That some areas also, like geology, became more complicated. It wasn't easy to drill just in bright spots. You actually need to understand better what is happening. So based on the history of seismic attributes, some people lost like the interest in seismic attributes, and then at some point they became used again, like popular again in the early 2000s, when spectral decomposition came out and coherence also with some advanced algorithms developed by Dr. Marford, one of my PhD advisors, by the way. So I would say that might be something that is happening in machine learning. You need to understand that, as I said, it's a powerful tool, but you need to use it correctly. It's not like, okay, I'm going to run 100 seismic attributes and let's see what happens. No, you need to think critically. Okay, do I need all these attributes? Maybe I just need couple attributes that are measuring energy and maybe some other attributes that are measuring texture. You need to try to always apply your geological knowledge when you use machine learning.
Lastly here, if you had to describe your journey in one word, what would it be and why?
I would say rewarding. I have always believed that hard work and discipline will help me to accomplish all my goals. I have applied all these values throughout my whole career. I would like this paper interpretation to be like a guide for future geoscientists to better use machine learning in general for their workflows. And hopefully this paper and these techniques can help them to better understand the subsurface and make better decisions.
Is there anything I should have asked you that I did not?
No, I think it was a very comprehensive interview, to be honest. Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm glad to be here with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Seismic Sound Off. SEG creates these episodes to celebrate and inspire the geophysicists of today and tomorrow. Visit seg.org to learn more. Email the show at podcast@seg.org. This episode was hosted, edited, and produced by me, Andrew Gary, at Treasurement. The SEG podcast team is Jennifer Cobb, Kathy Gamble, and Allie McGinnis. The podcast will return next week with a new episode. Until then, this is Seismic Sound Off, signaling off.